I stood in the parking lot of Westfield High School, staring at the massive brick building that had once been the setting for some of the worst years of my life. 20 years had passed since graduation, and the invitation to our reunion had sat on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks before I'd finally decided to attend. Part of me wondered why I was putting myself through this, voluntarily returning to a place filled with painful memories. The other part, the part that had spent 2 decades building something extraordinary, wanted to see their faces when they realized who I'd become. I adjusted my simple navy dress, deliberately understated, and walked toward the entrance. The reunion was being held in the newly renovated Anderson Community Center, a stunning modern addition to the school campus featuring floor-to-ceiling windows, a spacious atrium, and state-of-the-art facilities. I'd seen photos of it online during the fundraising campaign and had been impressed by the architectural vision. As I entered, I was immediately transported back to high school. Not by the building, which was new, but by the people. The same cliques, the same hierarchies, the same social dynamics that had made me miserable at 17 were already reforming as 40-year-olds mingled near the registration table. I recognized faces immediately. There was Preston Caldwell, former quarterback and prom king, his hairline receding but his swagger intact. Beside him stood Cassidy Monroe, head cheerleader, and the girl who'd made my life particularly hellish with her casual cruelty disguised as jokes. The popular crowd had congregated near the bar, already laughing too loudly, reliving their glory days. I'd been the opposite of them in every way, awkward, poor, unfashionable, the scholarship kid who wore thrift store clothes and couldn't afford to join clubs or attend dances. I'd been relentlessly mocked, especially by Cassidy and her circle, who'd treated me like I was invisible unless they needed a target for their entertainment. "Maya? Maya Hartley?" a voice called out, and I turned to see Tyler Brooks approaching. Tyler had been one of the few decent people in high school. Not popular enough to be in Cassidy's orbit, but not tormented like I'd been. "Tyler, hi," I said warmly. "You look great. How have you been?" We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on the basics. Tyler was a teacher now, married with 3 kids, living in a suburb 20 minutes away. He seemed genuinely happy, content with his life. "I have to admit," Tyler said, lowering his voice slightly, "I'm surprised to see you here. I remember high school wasn't exactly kind to you." "It wasn't," I agreed simply, "but 20 years is a long time. People change. I've changed." Tyler smiled. "Well, I'm glad you came. It takes courage to return to a place that wasn't welcoming." Before I could respond, a loud voice cut through the ambient conversation. "Oh my God, is that Maya Hartley?" Cassidy Monroe had spotted me, and she was heading in my direction with several former cheerleaders flanking her like an entourage. I braced myself, recognizing the tone, the same false sweetness that had always preceded something cutting. "Maya, I can't believe you actually came," Cassidy said, looking me up and down with thinly veiled judgment. "It's been forever. What have you been up to?" "This and that," I replied vaguely. "Working, mostly. You?" Cassidy launched into a detailed account of her life, married to a successful dentist, 3 children in private school, president of the PTA, volunteer coordinator for multiple charities. Everything was designed to demonstrate her continued position at the top of whatever hierarchy she'd constructed in her adult life. "And what about you?" she asked when she finally paused. "Are you married? Kids? What do you do for work?" "I'm not married," I said. "No kids. I work in technology." Cassidy's eyes gleamed with something that looked like satisfaction. "Technology? Like working at a computer store or something?" The condescension in her voice was barely concealed. Several people nearby had stopped their conversations to listen. "Something like that," I replied, refusing to take the bait. Preston Caldwell joined the group, draping his arm around Cassidy in a way that suggested they were probably having an affair, despite her mention of a husband. "Maya Hartley. Wow. Blast from the past. Still the quiet little nerd, huh?" "Some things don't change," I said with a slight smile. "And some things do," Preston continued, puffing out his chest slightly. "I'm executive vice president of sales at Mitchell Pharmaceuticals now. 6-figure salary, company car, corner office, made something of myself." The subtext was clear. "Unlike you." Others began sharing their accomplishments, positions at law firms, successful medical practices, business ownership. Each person's achievements were presented as evidence of their superiority, their success, their vindication of the high school hierarchy that had placed them at the top and me at the bottom. I listened quietly, nodding politely, saying nothing about my own life beyond vague generalities. This seemed to embolden them further. "I always wondered what happened to you," Cassidy said, her voice dripping with false concern. "After graduation, you just disappeared. I figured you'd probably ended up working retail or something. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Not everyone can be successful." The cruelty was casual, reflexive, the same dynamic that had made high school unbearable. And watching these 40-year-old adults fall back into the same patterns, I felt a mixture of pity and vindication. They hadn't grown at all. They were still the same insecure people who needed to diminish others to feel important. "This building is amazing, isn't it?" Tyler interjected, clearly trying to change the subject and deflect the attention away from me. The renovation turned out beautifully. "Oh, the Anderson Center." Cassidy brightened immediately. "Yes, it's gorgeous. My husband and I donated $15,000 to the building fund. We're platinum donors, which means our names are on the wall in the atrium." She gestured toward a wall near the entrance where donor names were indeed displayed in elegant lettering, organized by donation level. Several people in our group murmured appreciatively, mentioning their own donations ranging from $1,000 to $10,000. "It really is a remarkable facility," Preston added. The fundraising campaign was incredibly successful. They raised over $8 million total. $8.2 million actually, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. "What?" Cassidy asked. "The final fundraising total was $8.2 million, I repeated. "I followed the campaign pretty closely." Cassidy laughed, a sharp sound that drew more attention to our group. "Oh, did you donate too? That's so sweet. Every little bit helps, right? Even if it's just like $50. The dismissiveness in her tone made several people laugh. I was apparently being cast in my old role, the poor kid whose contributions were minimal and vaguely pitiful. "Actually," I said, my voice still calm, "I didn't donate to the campaign." "Of course not," Preston muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "too busy working at the Genius Bar." More laughter. I let it wash over me, watching them enjoy their moment of superiority. They had no idea what was coming, and I was savoring the anticipation of their realization. Tyler looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to defend me, but not knowing how. That's when I saw Principal Howard making his way through the crowd toward our group. Dr. Samuel Howard had been vice principal during our time at Westfield and had recently been promoted to principal. He was a kind man who'd always treated all students with respect, regardless of their social standing. "Excuse me, everyone," Dr. Howard said as he reached our circle. "I hope you're all enjoying the reunion and the new facility." There were enthusiastic responses from the group, people eager to impress the principal even 20 years after graduation. Some things never changed. "Miss Hartley," Dr. Howard said, turning to me with a warm smile, "I'm so glad you could make it. I was hoping to speak with you at some point this evening." The group fell silent, surprised that the principal had singled me out. "Of course," I said. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right," Dr. Howard replied. "I wanted to personally thank you for your extraordinary generosity. The Anderson Community Center wouldn't exist without you." The confusion on everyone's faces was palpable. Cassidy's smile had frozen, becoming uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said with a forced laugh. "What do you mean?" Maya said she didn't donate to the campaign. Dr. Howard looked puzzled, then understanding dawned. "Oh, I see. There may have been some confusion. Miss Hartley didn't donate to the campaign because she funded the entire project independently. She's the sole benefactor of the Anderson Community Center." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that crowded room. People from other conversations had turned to listen, sensing something significant was happening. "What?" Preston said finally, his voice strangled. "That's not possible. The campaign raised $8 million. $8.2 million, Dr. Howard corrected, which was the original fundraising goal. However, Miss Hartley approached the school board privately 2 years ago and offered to fund the entire project herself, on the condition that it remain anonymous until after construction was completed. He smiled at me. She donated $12 million total, $8.2 million for the building itself, plus an additional $3.8 million for an endowment to cover maintenance, programming, and ongoing improvements in perpetuity. I watched the information sink in, watched their faces transform from confusion to shock to something that looked like nausea. $12 million. I donated $12 million. But the donor wall, Cassidy stammered, gesturing toward the atrium. All those names, the platinum donors, are individuals who donated to the school's general fund during the time we thought we were still fundraising, Dr. Howard explained. Their generosity is appreciated and recognized. But Miss Hartley funded the actual construction and endowment. Her name isn't on the wall because she requested anonymity. He looked at me curiously. Though I'm surprised you're revealing it now. You were quite insistent about privacy. Circumstances change, I said with a slight smile, and I decided it was time to be honest about my involvement. Dr. Howard nodded and excused himself, but not before thanking me again profusely and inviting me to a private tour of the facilities before I left. The moment he walked away, everyone started talking at once. $12 million? How is that possible? What do you do, Maya? I looked at each of them calmly. These people who'd spent the past 30 minutes, assuming I'd amounted to nothing, who'd laughed at the idea that I might have donated even $50. I told you I work in technology, I said. I'm the founder and CEO of Hartley Data Solutions. We develop security software for enterprise clients. The company went public 4 years ago. Preston pulled out his phone, frantically typing. I knew what he was searching for, and I waited patiently as he found what he was looking for. Holy shit, he breathed, staring at his screen. Hartley Data Solutions is worth $2.3 billion. You're worth... He looked up at me, his face pale. Forbes estimated your personal net worth at $800 million last year. The number hung in the air like a bomb. $800 million. I'd become one of the wealthiest self-made women in technology, building a company from nothing in my tiny apartment with money saved from 3 jobs. Cassidy looked like she might faint. But you were so poor in high school. You wore the same clothes every week. You couldn't afford anything. That's true, I agreed. My mom was a single parent working 2 jobs. We barely made rent most months. I was on scholarship here, wore thrift store clothes, and qualified for free lunch. You all reminded me of that daily. I let that sink in before continuing. But being poor doesn't mean being stupid or unambitious. I got a full academic scholarship to MIT. I graduated top of my class with degrees in computer science and business, and I spent the next 20 years building something extraordinary. Why didn't you say anything? Tyler asked, his voice filled with wonder rather than accusation. When Cassidy asked what you did, why didn't you just tell us? Because I wanted to see who you all had become, I said honestly. I wanted to see if 20 years had changed the people who'd made my life miserable. If you'd grown, matured, developed empathy or perspective. I looked at Cassidy and Preston specifically. You haven't. You're still the same cruel people who judged others by their appearance, their wealth, their social status. You assumed I'd failed because that's what made you feel superior. Cassidy's face had gone red. Maya, we were just joking around. You know how it is at these things, everyone catching up, friendly teasing? Friendly teasing? I repeated. Is that what you call suggesting I work retail as if it's failure? Laughing at the idea I might have donated even a small amount to the school? Making assumptions about my life based on who I was at 17? Preston tried to recover. Look, we didn't mean anything by it. And honestly, good for you. Really. You clearly did well for yourself. I did, I agreed. But not because of anything I learned here. I succeeded despite this place, despite the people who made me feel worthless for being poor, for being different, for not fitting into your narrow definition of acceptable. More people had gathered now, the entire reunion seemingly drawn to our conversation. I recognized other faces from high school, some kind, most indifferent, several who'd participated in making me miserable. I came here tonight because I wanted closure, I continued. I wanted to face the place and the people who'd hurt me and prove to myself that I'd moved beyond it. that I didn't need their validation or approval. I looked around at the assembled crowd. And I funded this community center because despite my personal experiences, I believe in education. I believe in giving opportunities to students who might not otherwise have them. The endowment I created includes scholarship funding for students from low-income families. It funds after-school programs, technology resources, and community events. It ensures that kids like I have access to opportunities kids like you took for granted. The shame on some faces was evident. Others still looked defensive, unable to accept that they'd been wrong. This building exists to serve the community, I said, to provide space for students to learn, grow, and explore their potential, regardless of their economic background. That's why I funded it, not for recognition or to prove anything, but because I remember what it felt like to be excluded, to be limited by circumstances beyond my control. Dr. Howard had returned and was listening at the edge of the crowd. When I finished, he stepped forward. Miss Hartley's generosity has transformed this school and community. The Anderson Center serves over 3,000 students annually, plus community members of all ages. Her endowment ensures it will continue serving them for generations. He looked at the assembled alumni. I hope you all take inspiration from her example, not just her financial success, but her commitment to giving back and creating opportunities for others. The crowd began to disperse, people returning to their conversations but with a different energy now. The easy nostalgia had been punctured by reality. Cassidy approached me tentatively, Preston hanging back but watching. Maya, I owe you an apology. What I said earlier was cruel and wrong. I'm embarrassed. You should be, I said bluntly. But I don't need your apology, Cassidy. I needed it 20 years ago when you made me feel worthless every single day. I needed it in sophomore year when you convinced everyone to exclude me from the winter formal. I needed it in junior year when you started rumors about me stealing because I was poor. Cassidy's eyes filled with tears. I was a terrible person. I don't have an excuse. No, you don't, I agreed. But you're not unique. Half the people here participated in making this school unbearable for anyone who didn't fit their definition of acceptable. And based on tonight, many of you haven't changed at all. Preston stepped forward. That's not fair. We were kids. Everyone does stupid things in high school. True, I said, but most people grow past those stupid things. They develop empathy, perspective, recognition that they were wrong. You all walked in here tonight and immediately re-established the same social hierarchies, the same judgments, the same casual cruelty you practiced at 17. I looked at him directly. You didn't make fun of me tonight because of anything I did. You made fun of me because of who you remembered me being 20 years ago. Because it made you feel superior to imagine I'd failed while you succeeded. Tyler spoke up from where he'd been standing quietly. Maya's right. I watched it happen. The moment people realized who she was, they started making assumptions and jokes. Nobody asked about her life with genuine interest. They just assumed she'd struggled and found that amusing. Several people looked uncomfortable, perhaps recognizing themselves in that description. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad, I said, my voice softer now. Or actually, maybe I am a little. But mostly I'm saying it because these patterns matter. The way you treat people, the assumptions you make, the casual cruelty you dismiss as jokes, it shapes lives. It shaped mine. For years after high school, I struggled with self-worth. I was successful professionally, but constantly felt like an imposter, like I didn't deserve my achievements. It took therapy and tremendous work to recognize that the voice in my head telling me I wasn't good enough was your voice, Cassidy, and Preston's, and dozens of others who treated me like I was less than human. The crowd was absolutely silent now, the weight of my words settling over them. I'd built a multi-million-dollar company, employed thousands of people, created technology that protects data for half the Fortune 500, and I still sometimes hear your laughter when I walk into a room. That's the legacy of your jokes and teasing. Cassidy was openly crying now. I'm so sorry, truly. I wish I could take it all back. You can't, I said simply. But you can be better going forward. You can teach your children to be kind, to treat everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. You can examine your own biases and work to overcome them. I looked around at everyone. That goes for all of you. 20 years is a long time to hold on to high school mentalities. Some of you have kids in this school now. The example you set, the values you model, the way you treat others, it matters. Dr. Howard stepped forward again. On that note, I think this might be a good time to show Miss Stelling Hartley the scholarship program her endowment has funded. Would anyone like to join us? About 20 people expressed interest, including Tyler and, surprisingly, Cassidy. We walked through the Anderson Center, Dr. Howard explaining the various programs and spaces. The building was genuinely beautiful, modern, functional, welcoming. It featured a library, computer labs, art studios, a small theater, and multi-purpose rooms for community events. The scholarship program has already supported 32 students, Dr. Howard explained as we toured the college prep center. Many of them are first-generation college students who wouldn't have had access to SAT prep, college counseling, or application support without this funding. He showed us photos of scholarship recipients, diverse faces representing the community, students who look like I had 20 years ago. Uncertain but hopeful, carrying the weight of their family's dreams alongside their own ambitions. This is Janelle Torres, Dr. Howard said, pointing to one photo. Full scholarship to Stanford this year, wants to study engineering. Her parents are farm workers who immigrated from Mexico. She's the first in her family to attend college. And this is Marcus Washington, at Yale studying political science. Plans to go to law school and eventually run for office. He went through several more profiles, each one representing a life changed by access to resources and opportunities. By the time we finished the tour, even the most defensive people in our group seemed moved. This was real impact, tangible change, lives redirected toward possibility rather than limited by circumstance. Maya, Cassidy said as we returned to the main atrium, what you've done here is incredible. These kids will never know the person who made this possible, but their lives are being transformed by your generosity. They don't need to know who funded it, I replied. They just need to have the opportunities. That's what matters. Preston approached with what looked like genuine humility. I was wrong earlier. About everything. You didn't just succeed professionally, you've done something meaningful with that success. That's rare. It shouldn't be rare, I said. Success means nothing if it's only for yourself. What's the point of building wealth if you don't use at least some of it to make the world better? As the evening progressed, the atmosphere of the reunion shifted. People approached me with genuine curiosity now, asking about my work and my life, without the judgment and assumption that had colored earlier interactions. Some shared their own struggles and achievements with surprising honesty. Tyler and I spent an hour talking about education, about the challenges teachers face, and the resources that could help address them. I ended up promising to meet with him and several other teacher alumni to discuss additional funding for classroom technology and supplies. Even Cassidy seemed genuinely changed by the evening. She pulled me aside as things were winding down. I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that tonight has been a wake-up call. I recognize how I've been living, performatively, focused on status and appearance, teaching my kids the same toxic values I learned. She wiped her eyes. I'm going to do better. Be better. And I'm going to make sure my children understand the importance of kindness and treating everyone with respect, regardless of their circumstances. That's all anyone can do, I said. Recognize their mistakes and commit to being better. The past can't change, but the future is unwritten. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Howard approached with several school board members who'd arrived for the latter part of the evening. Miss Hartley, we'd like to formally recognize your contribution at an upcoming board meeting. If you'd be comfortable with that, perhaps present you with an award or plaque commemorating your generosity. I considered it, then shook my head. I appreciate the thought, but I'd prefer to remain relatively low profile about this. Tonight's revelation was somewhat spontaneous, brought on by circumstances. But I don't need public recognition or awards. Are you sure? One board member asked. Your generosity deserves to be celebrated and recognized. What deserves to be celebrated, I replied, are the students who will benefit from the resources. Keep the focus on them, on their achievements and potential. My role is just providing tools. They're the ones who will do the actual work of building their futures. Dr. Howard smiled warmly. You're remarkable, Miss Hartley. Not just for your success or your generosity, but for your perspective. The students and community are lucky to have you as an advocate. We said our goodbyes, and I walked back to my car as the reunion continued inside. The parking lot was quiet, a sharp contrast to the noise and emotion of the evening. I sat in my car for a moment, processing everything that had happened. 20 years ago, I'd walked out of this school for the last time feeling free. Free from the judgment, the cruelty, the constant reminder that I was different and less than. I'd promised myself I'd never return, that I'd build a life so far removed from Westfield that these people and their opinions would become irrelevant. I'd succeeded in that. But what I'd discovered tonight was that completely erasing the past wasn't possible or even desirable. Those experiences, painful as they were, had shaped my values and priorities. They'd taught me empathy, resilience, and the importance of creating opportunities for others. Coming back to face the people who'd hurt me, seeing their assumptions about my failure, and then revealing the truth of my success, it hadn't been about revenge or vindication. It had been about demonstrating that their definitions of worth and success were shallow and ultimately meaningless. That being poor at 17 didn't determine your value or your future. That kindness and contribution mattered more than status or appearance. That growth and change were possible if you were willing to examine yourself honestly. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Thank you for coming tonight, and for everything you've done for the school. You inspired a lot of people, including me. Let's definitely talk about those educational initiatives. I smiled and responded positively, then started my car. As I drove away from Westfield High School, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The building in my rearview mirror represented more than just bricks and mortar. It represented possibility, opportunity, and the chance for students like I'd been to access resources that might change their trajectories. Over the next few weeks, the story of my donation apparently spread through our alumni network. I received dozens of messages from former classmates, some apologizing for past behavior, others sharing their own stories of struggle and success, many expressing admiration for what I'd built and contributed. A few messages came from people who'd been kind to me in high school, reaching out to reconnect. Those were the relationships I chose to nurture, building adult friendships based on mutual respect and genuine connection. Cassidy sent a long, thoughtful email detailing her reflections on the reunion and her commitment to changing her behavior and values. She asked if we might meet for coffee sometime. Not to absolve her guilt, but to learn from someone who'd overcome circumstances she'd never faced. I agreed to meet her, though with cautious optimism. People could change, but it required sustained effort and genuine commitment, not just momentary remorse after being confronted with consequences. Preston's message was briefer, but seemed sincere. An acknowledgement that he'd been wrong, an expression of respect for what I'd achieved and contributed, and a promise to examine his own biases and behavior. I responded politely but didn't pursue further connection. Some relationships from the past were better left there. The most meaningful messages came from people I didn't remember well or at all. Classmates who'd been quiet observers in high school, neither perpetrators nor victims of the social dynamics, but complicit through their silence. Many expressed regrets at not speaking up, not challenging the cruelty they'd witnessed, not being kinder when it mattered. Those messages resonated with me because they reflected a truth I'd learned. It's not enough to simply not be cruel. Kindness requires active participation, standing up for others, challenging unfair treatment, even when it's uncomfortable or socially risky. 3 months after the reunion, I attended a school board meeting where they were discussing expansion of the scholarship program. The results from the first 2 years had been remarkable. Scholarship recipients were outperforming their peers academically, pursuing higher education at rates significantly above the school average, and staying connected to the program through mentorship of younger students. The impact extends beyond just the scholarship recipients, the program director explained. We're seeing positive effects throughout the student body. The emphasis on opportunity, regardless of economic background, has shifted the culture. She showed data on improved academic performance, increased college applications, and higher graduation rates across all demographic groups. The presence of robust support systems and clear pathways to success was benefiting everyone, not just those receiving direct financial assistance. "We'd like to expand the program," the superintendent said, looking at me. "Add more scholarship slots, increase funding for college prep resources, and create a summer enrichment program. Would you be willing to discuss additional funding?" I'd anticipated this request and had already met with my financial advisors about establishing a larger educational foundation. "I'm prepared to donate an additional $25 million to create the Westfield Educational Opportunity Foundation," I said. "This will be a perpetual endowment providing scholarships, educational programming, and community resources in perpetuity." The board members looked stunned. $25 million would transform what was possible for students in this community for generations. "The foundation will be independently managed," I continued, "but I'll remain involved in an advisory capacity. I want to ensure the funding serves its intended purpose and reaches students who need it most." I pulled out a proposal my team had prepared, outlining the foundation's structure, governance, and programming. It was comprehensive, addressing everything from scholarship criteria to program evaluation to sustainability planning. Over the next 6 months, we established the foundation, hired professional staff, and launched expanded programs. The response from the community was overwhelming: students applying for scholarships, parents expressing gratitude, teachers reporting increased engagement and hope among students who'd previously seen limited futures. I visited the school several times, speaking to scholarship recipients about education, career development, and the importance of giving back. These conversations were the most meaningful part of the entire experience. Seeing my younger self reflected in their faces, their circumstances, their mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Don't let anyone tell you that where you come from determines where you can go," I told a group of scholarship students during one visit. "Economic circumstances are real and create real barriers, but they don't define your worth or your potential." I shared my own story, the poverty, the bullying, the self-doubt, but also the determination, the opportunities I'd fought for, the mentors who'd believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself. "Success isn't about proving wrong the people who doubted you," I said. "It's about proving right the person you always knew you could be. It's about building something meaningful and using whatever you achieve to create opportunities for others." One student, a quiet girl named Isabella who reminded me painfully of my younger self, raised her hand. "How did you stop caring what other people thought about you?" she asked. "How did you get past the hurt?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I'm not sure I ever completely got past it. Those experiences shaped me, they taught me empathy, and gave me perspective, but they also left scars. What changed wasn't that the hurt disappeared, but that I learned to transform it into something constructive. Instead of letting the pain make me bitter or small, I used it as motivation. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered how people had assumed I'd fail, and I worked harder. Every time I achieved something significant, I thought about the kid who'd felt worthless and reminded myself that she deserved every success. I looked at Isabella directly. "You won't forget the people who hurt you or made you feel less than, but you can choose what to do with those memories. You can let them define you, or you can use them to fuel your determination to be better, achieve more, and create a different narrative for yourself and others." The students listened intently, and I saw recognition in their faces. They understood that I wasn't speaking theoretically. I'd lived this, survived it, and transformed it into something meaningful. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey from that painful reunion to this moment. What had started as a somewhat vindictive desire to show my former classmates what I'd achieved had evolved into something more purposeful. A commitment to ensuring other students didn't face the same barriers and dismissals I'd experienced. The reunion had been transformative, but not in the way I'd anticipated. I'd gone expecting to find satisfaction in their shock and regret. Instead, I'd found an opportunity to create lasting change, to transform a place of painful memories into one of genuine opportunity. The laughter at the reunion had stung briefly, the assumptions about my failure had been insulting. But the revelation of the truth, that I'd funded the building they stood in, that I'd achieved more than any of them had imagined, that I was using that success to transform lives, had been satisfying in a deeper way than simple vindication. It demonstrated that success wasn't about climbing social hierarchies or accumulating status symbols. It was about building something meaningful, contributing to your community, and creating opportunities for others to succeed. 3 years after the reunion, the Westfield Educational Opportunity Foundation had provided full scholarships to 118 students, supported countless others through tutoring and college prep programs, and demonstrably improved educational outcomes across the district. The Anderson Community Center hosted hundreds of events annually, serving thousands of community members. And I'd reconnected with several former classmates who'd grown into thoughtful, kind adults committed to making positive contributions in their own spheres. The story of my donation had spread beyond our alumni network, resulting in media coverage and speaking invitations. I'd been profiled in business publications and educational journals, presented as an example of both entrepreneurial success and philanthropic impact. But the recognition I valued most came from the students. The handwritten thank you notes from scholarship recipients, the emails from graduates describing their college experiences and career plans, the photos of students in the Anderson Center pursuing their passions and developing their potential. They laughed at me at the reunion until they found out I paid for the building. But more importantly, until they realized I'd paid for it not to prove my worth to them, but to prove to students like I'd been that their worth was inherent, regardless of their circumstances. That was the real victory. Not in their shock or regret, but in the opportunities created, the lives changed, and the message sent to every student who'd ever felt dismissed or limited by circumstances beyond their control. You are worthy, you are capable, and your potential is unlimited.